Nordstrom's founder had no retail experience at all when he opened his store. He worked for years in backbreaking minimum wage jobs and then became a potato farmer, saving up until he had the chance to open a small shoe store. When he was only 11 years old, he was forced to drop out of school. Then, when he turned 16, he packed his bags and left his home and family to move to America, arriving with only $5 in his pocket. This is the story of how Nordstrom became a top luxury retailer in the United States, carrying designer brands like Gucci, Burberry, Prada, Off-White, and more. The story of Nordstrom begins in Luleå, a small town in the very north of Sweden. There, in 1871, John Nordstrom was born. John was the middle child of 5 children. His childhood in Sweden was harsh and difficult. John's father, Nils, was a blacksmith, wagon maker, and farmer. He died when John was only 8 years old, leaving John's mother, Katharina, to run the farm and raise the family by herself. 3 years after his father's death, John's mother took him out of school when he was in the 6th grade. He had to work on the farm to help his family. His mother expected him to be able to do as much work as his brother, who was 10 years older. John was very unhappy during this time. I often cried when I had trouble doing things she expected me to do and couldn't, and felt very helpless, he later revealed. After 5 years of farm work, John packed his bags to leave his family and hometown forever with all the money he had, a little over $100. He was only 16 years old.
Before we get into the next part of the story, we would like to quickly thank our sponsor, Morning Brew. Do you often find business, finance, or tech news confusing? Well, you're not alone. According to a survey, more than half of Americans find the news more confusing than educational due to the overwhelming volume and speed. Fortunately, today's video sponsor, Morning Brew, has a daily newsletter that makes it easy to follow the most interesting business, finance, and tech news, like why the time to go after your dream job is now. Plus, you can get a hold of the top stories in just 5 minutes, so you won't feel left behind when they come up amongst colleagues or friends. It's completely free to sign up and only takes 15 seconds. Don't miss out by clicking the link in the description box today.
It was the peak of the wave of Swedish immigration to America. John and 2 of his friends headed for the Pacific Northwest, a popular destination for Swedish immigrants. The 3 travelers began with a 2-day boat trip to Stockholm, the capital of Sweden. It took another 3 days to travel to a seaport from where they could sail to England. In England, John boarded a train for the first time to get to Liverpool. From there, he and his friends could find passage to America. It was a 10-day journey to New York, where they bought train tickets for Michigan. At this point, John only had $5 left in his pocket. Many American immigrants worked in demanding labor jobs, and John was no exception. His cousin got him a job loading iron ore. He would lift the iron into a wheelbarrow, push it to a platform 100 feet away, and empty it into railroad cars. For 10 hours of heavy work, John's pay was only $1.60, and he nearly lost his life in an iron ore slide. Over the next few years, John made his way west while working back-breaking jobs. He worked as a coal digger, a railroad worker, a gold and silver miner, and a logger. The conditions for labor workers were harsh and dangerous, and John had to share a bunk in a camp that smelled of horses and was brutally cold. He would often wake up with his hair frozen and lice bites on his body. But despite the bleak lifestyle and prospects, John used his determination and strength to push forward. He eventually ended up in Seattle, working at a sawmill, and was paid even less than before, $1.50 a day. John also witnessed a tragic accident while working. His partner got caught on a tree and was dragged down a long drop. John could do nothing to help as the man passed One morning, he picked up a newspaper and read a headline that would bring him back on the road and completely change his life. Gold was discovered in the Yukon. John, like thousands of others, jumped at the opportunity and hopped on a train to Klondike. This was his second journey in search of a brighter future, but this time he went alone. From Seattle, John rode on a crowded coal ship to Alaska. He had a second-class ticket and slept with the mules on this ship. John made the rest of the way by horse and on foot, and almost froze to death. He had only a pair of cheap shoes, which gave him very little protection from the Alaska cold. At one point, he nearly froze to death and had to eat his horse for food. Once finally in Klondike, John got to work digging. It was here that he met Carl Wallen, a fellow Swedish immigrant and gold rush adventurer. After 2 years of hard work and searching, John struck gold. But trouble arose when another miner argued against his claim to the gold. During the gold rush, there were a lot of arguments about land claims as everyone fought for the promise of riches. Unfortunately for John, the other miner's brother was the local land commissioner who would make the final decision in the legal argument. Though he had worked the land for 2 years and the gold would make him rich, John knew he would probably lose if he tried to fight an unfair battle. Instead, John decided to settle and accept an offer of $30,000 in exchange for his claim. He split the money with 2 of his partners and returned home with $13,000 in his pocket. John reunited with Hilda and the couple got married within a year. He also bought some property in Seattle and built 2 houses. Business was thriving in Seattle, and the population had doubled in the past 10 years. Seattle was one endpoint of the Great Northern Railroad, which would connect the whole country. Everyone moved there, hoping to make money once the railroad could bring in a steady flow of people. When news of the gold rush came, Seattle boomed as thousands of people arrived on their way to Alaska. While passing through, they gave a lot of business to hotels and restaurants and boosted the economy. They bought tons of supplies to last them up north, from food to winter clothing to equipment. Now 29 years old and married, John was looking for a business opportunity to invest in. He reconnected with Carl, the Swedish man he met in Klondike while panning for gold. Carl was a shoemaker who owned a small shop in Seattle. John would visit him often at the store, and one day Carl suggested that he and John go into business together. They decided to open a shoe retail store. John invested $4,000 to expand Carl's location and buy inventory for their business. The next year, the partners opened Wallen and Nordstrom on 4th and Pike Street in Seattle. It was a small 20-foot shop. Both partners had no retail experience and spoke very little English. On their first day, no customers arrived in the morning, and Carl headed out for lunch. As soon as he left, a woman came by the store, admiring a pair of shoes in the front window. Unlike his shoemaking partner, John had no experience fitting shoes. John was nervous. He looked in their inventory, but couldn't find the style the woman wanted anywhere. He was ready to give up when he decided to take the shoes from the window display and sell them to the customer. John never found out if the shoes fit, but the woman bought them anyway. That was Wallen and Nordstrom's first sale ever. The total revenue from their opening day amounted to only $12.50. The Seattle shoe business was competitive. There was a fashion shoe store down the street from Wallen and Nordstrom, and others were selling winter boots for only $3. John and Carl's shoes ranged from $195 to $495. At first, the store only stocked medium-width shoes, but the shop had a lot of Swedish customers who needed larger shoes than the average American. The partners noticed this and began keeping larger widths and sizes in their inventory. This began the company's reputation for having many options to suit their customers' needs. The store focused on customer service and quality. They offered many practical shoes rather than fashion styles. John noted customers' feedback every day and would write down when they wanted something the store didn't offer, to make sure the store had what they wanted in the future. By the end of their first summer, business was steady at Wallen and Nordstrom. The partners took home $75 a month, and on busy days, they sold over $100 worth of shoes. After 4 years in business, the store's yearly revenue reached $47,000. John and Carl also expanded their business and relocated to a larger space downtown. John was also raising his family during this time. He and Hilda had their first child, Everett, only a few years later after Wallen and Nordstrom first went into business. Their second son, Elmer, was only 1 year younger than Everett. Lloyd, the third and youngest son in the family, was born 6 years after Elmer. All three boys began working in their father's store at age 12. After 2 decades in business, Wallen and Nordstrom decided to open a second location. They took out a $10,000 loan from the Scandinavian American Bank. John had used both of his houses and property to secure the loan. The second store was in the university area, where all three Nordstrom sons would go to school. At 20 years old, Everett had just graduated from business school and was put in charge of the second store. Unfortunately, this phase was the end of the road for Wallen and Nordstrom. After almost 30 years of working together, John and Carl's relationship had gone downhill. They did not see eye to eye on business decisions and officially parted ways. John sold his share of the company to Everett and Elmer for $120,000 when they were only 26 and 24 years old. The next year, Carl decided to sell his share to Everett and Elmer as well. He saw that John was out enjoying life away from the business and wanted to do the same. Together, the Nordstrom brothers expanded and modernized the business. They doubled the store size, reorganized the layout, and redesigned the inside. They also changed the name from Wallen and Nordstrom to simply Nordstrom. Unfortunately, hard times were ahead for everyone. Black Tuesday and the Great Depression hit, and prices for everything dropped. After the stock market crashed, everyone hung on tight to the money they had. Customers watched prices falling and held off on buying shoes, waiting for prices to go down even more. Lloyd joined the family business during the Depression. Not wanting any handouts, he asked how much it would cost him to buy a share of the company like his brothers had. Everett and Elmer went to their accountant, who told them that Nordstrom now had zero value, so Lloyd joined without paying a single penny. Prices were so low that Nordstrom had to sell twice as many shoes to break even. The brothers agreed that the most important thing was their father's security. John's worth was all in the business and he did not have much money, so Nordstrom going out of business would ruin him. But business got so bad that the brothers believed that they would have to close the store. They decided to hang on for a little while longer. The next month, they saw an increase in sales that kept them alive. Despite the circumstances, the brothers worked together to overcome the challenges and make the best of the situation. Everett, Elmer, and Lloyd also all got married during the Depression. 10 years after taking over the business, the brothers made a big mistake. They were so busy during the holiday season that they missed the deadline to renew the lease on their store. Their landlord said that he planned to increase the rent by a lot, so the brothers found another location and moved the store. Everyone thought it was risky, as they were moving from the middle of a busy shopping area to the edge of downtown. But the move ended up giving Nordstrom more opportunities to expand. Every time that space opened up in their new building, they went for it. When it was time for Nordstrom to become an incorporated company, the brothers had a dilemma. They needed to create formal titles: president, vice president, and treasurer. But they always shared their work as a team and wanted to be equals in the business. Everett, as the oldest, was offered the role of president. He decided that he would do it, but only for 2 years. The three brothers decided they would rotate the roles every 2 years to keep things fair. Everett, Elmer, and Lloyd were good partners who understood each other's strengths and weaknesses. They resolved business issues quickly and pretty much always agreed on important decisions. Together, they managed to make all their payments on time during the Depression. Then, the Second World War came. Seattle was in blackouts as they feared being the target of an attack from the West Coast. Air sirens went off and people would turn off the lights and cover their windows all day. Eventually, the city determined they were safe for now, but the war had officially arrived. As the family's youngest son, Lloyd felt it was his responsibility to contribute to the war effort, and he joined the Navy. During the war, Nordstrom had to use ration stamps to stock shoes. Customers were only allowed 3 pairs of shoes per year. Inventory became very difficult for the store to secure. Half of the manufacturer's production had to go towards the war effort, and all the country's leather supply went to the military. The soles of shoes were replaced with rubber in place of leather. The brothers traveled across the country to hunt down shoes and offer the quality and variety Nordstrom was known for. They went to shoe conventions and met with manufacturers, and one time prepaid thousands of dollars to convince a manufacturer to take them as a client. Post-war, Nordstrom focused on expansion. The brothers agreed that either the company had to be large enough to support all 3 of their families, or it would support none of them. They leased space in Northgate, one of America's first shopping malls. It was an entirely new concept for a company to rent out one of the several spaces in a big shopping center. They would be in the suburbs instead of an urban center, in a location full of competitors. Many people doubted the venture, including John, but malls ended up being the future of retail. Over the next 10 years, Everett, Elmer, and Lloyd doubled the size of their main location, opened several more stores, and leased 12 more shoe departments. Nordstrom was now the biggest shoe chain in the country. The company had achieved almost everything it could as a shoe store in the Pacific Northwest. The brothers decided that the next step would be to expand into selling clothing. Lloyd led the charge, and Nordstrom bought Best Apparel Inc., a top women's fashion retailer in Seattle. The company's revenue tripled within 6 years, with half of its sales coming from clothes. This was the last phase of Nordstrom's journey that its founder lived to see. John passed away during this time at age 92. Before his death, the shoe industry had recognized John's achievements by naming him Shoe Man of the Century. When Everett and Elmer turned 65, the brothers began to think of retirement. Almost all of their net worth was in the company, so they spoke with potential buyers to sell Nordstrom. By then, Everett's son, Bruce Nordstrom, Elmer's sons, John and Jim Nordstrom, and Lloyd's son-in-law, Jack McMillan, all worked in the company. When they heard their fathers were thinking of selling to outsiders, they came up with a plan to keep the business in the family. The brothers weren't sure that the third generation could work together as well as they had to run the business. But Bruce, John, Jim, and Jack came together to convince their fathers to let them take charge. They gave a presentation with their goals outlined and a roadmap. They were honest about their strengths and weaknesses. The brothers were impressed from their son's dedication and enthusiasm. The plan worked, but there was a problem. The brothers didn't have much money to retire with. Their value was almost all in the business, and they were no longer selling the company. There was only one solution. Nordstrom went public, and people were able to buy shares in the company. This was very out of character for the family, as they were known for being private and quiet about their business. When it went public, the company's stock sold out in one day. The brothers each sold 147,000 shares of the company and officially retired. They remained on the board as co-chairman, but the business was firmly in the hands of the next generation. In that fateful presentation, the third generation had made a big promise. They predicted that with them in charge, Nordstrom's sales would reach 100 million within 10 years. 10 years later, the revenue ended up being almost $500 million, 5 times the amount they estimated. The new leadership focused on expanding Nordstrom to the rest of America. The company had a strong presence in the Pacific Northwest, but it was unknown in the rest of the country. Expanding to large, already competitive markets was seen as risky. Nordstrom began their countrywide expansion by opening 3 locations in Alaska. But the big goal was California. California was a sophisticated area with many options for fashionable shoppers. The family knew they couldn't compete using exclusive styles or the most beautiful locations. They had to make a name based on customer service. It was important that they hired the right manager for this store, which represented their first expansion into the South. The man they offered the position to turned it down because he didn't want to move his family. Betsy Sanders, Nordstrom's only woman manager at the time, was offered the management role. She jumped at the opportunity. The store ended up being a huge success, and Nordstrom continued their expansion, opening 24 more stores within the following decade. Under the third generation, Nordstrom became America's largest specialty store chain and made the Forbes 500 list of the country's largest companies. The company also went to the eastern United States, opening their first East Coast store in Virginia. After years of successful growth, it was almost time to pass down ownership again. But the fourth generation of Nordstrom's was still quite young. The company brought in experienced non-family members to be co-presidents. But after a few years of lackluster revenue and profits, as well as legal troubles with unions and lawsuits, 2 of the co-presidents were asked to leave their roles. The company was led by John Whitaker and Ray Johnson. By now, the fourth generation of the Nordstrom family was ready to step up. This new generation was made up of 6 brothers and cousins, all 31 to 34 years old. After they took the reins, the company began online retail, a venture that brought in $215 million in its first year. Unfortunately, things remained rocky overall. 2 of the Nordstrom family members left to pursue other paths. the company's earnings did not bounce back. Sales were down, and shoppers became bored with the company's clothing options. Nordstrom tried to attract new young shoppers and improve the company's sales. They launched campaigns to renew interest, but it backfired. The company's older shoppers felt forgotten. Historically, Nordstrom prioritized its employees as the most important group of people, right after the customers. But now, the employees felt unimportant, and they were losing their passion. People wondered if the company would be sold. Its earnings were down, and the value of the company shares dropped by more than 50%. Analysts said Nordstrom no longer understood the needs of its customers. The Nordstrom family realized they had to go back to their roots. The family company was created on a simple principle: to take care of the customer first. And the people who knew the most about customers were the employees that spoke to them every day. Many changes came at once. John Whitaker, the company's chief executive, and Marty Wickstrom, its president, both left. Blake and Pete Nordstrom, Bruce's sons, replaced them, and Bruce returned as chairman. The Nordstrom family was running the show again. Some analysts doubted that the young Nordstroms were experienced enough to turn the ship around. They ranked the company's stock lower when these changes came in. People said that large, successful companies could not succeed if they were running like a family business. Under Blake, Peter, Eric, and Bruce's leadership, Nordstrom stopped focusing on expanding and paid more attention to its customers, employees, and existing stores. The company also invested into managing their inventory better and upgraded to new computer systems. Despite what some analysts thought about the Nordstrom family's potential, the company thrived with them in charge. Nordstrom recovered within a few years, and its sales remained steady when other competitors were struggling. Blake, Peter, Eric, and Bruce Nordstrom were named Executives of the Year by one business journal. The company went international when it opened locations in Canada and Puerto Rico. Nordstrom also expanded into selling accessories, home goods, and gifts. Today, Nordstrom is known for being a top luxury retailer offering many designer brands like Gucci, Burberry, Prada, Off-White, and more. The company also regularly makes the Fortune 500 list and the magazine's list of the 100 best companies to work for. This is the story of how a 16-year-old farmer arrived in America with only $5 in his pocket. He couldn't speak English and only had a 6th grade education. With a lot of perseverance and hard work, he found a way to open a small shoe store in Seattle and raised a family that helped turn it into a billion-dollar chain. For more inspiring stories and advice from today's most successful leaders, don't forget to subscribe to our channel.